proverb, I am because we are, is the foundation of the ACBN YouTube channel. Tap in for all of our remarkable content and ecosystem mobilization through the phenomenal practitioners and thought leaders we engage on this channel. In the words of Adrienne Marie Brown, things are not getting worse, they are getting uncovered. We must hold each other tight to pull back the veil. Get ready for another amazing ACBN-powered interview.
And what it used to be like, and they have no access to the young people who need to hear that, because the young people are being trained by the institution of the state and the institution of the government, whose business is to mold a new generation after their likeness and their image, and therefore you lose the image of who it is that you are as a family member, as a clan member, as a member of a race, as a member of a people, as a member of a culture.
Right. Wow. I just feel like I have to snap my fingers because it's truth. You know, it reminds me even of myself growing up. My parents would be like, did you call your grandparents? And I'd always used to be like, I gotta call them. But hearing that, I kind of felt like the young self was just put in check a little bit because I see the need, you know? But let me ask you, from your perspective, what, like in an ideal world, your ideal world, what is the exact role do you see an elder playing in the community, like your ideal world, or maybe the role you play or that you hope to be playing in your community?
Yes, I see that role as senior advisors and counselors to the active generation. When I say active generation, it is normal to say that young people belong to the generation that is of the day. They're the workers, they're the engines, they're the ones who are actively involved in the day-to-day activities of any society. But their day-to-day activities, them being the engines of the society of the day, cannot operate in a vacuum without direction, without instruction, without advice. You can't buy a new machine without an instruction book. You know, you just can't go into the store and take a machine out the box and just operate it without knowing how to operate it or what it's used for. And it is the elders who are in every community who are those advisors and those that counselors to the current generation of the best way to achieve the results of what you aspire to do to bring your community forward. Every generation should be able to, first of all, maintain and sustain its society, and then, if at all possible, to advance that society to another level. And in order to do that, one must be connected with its past in order to fully assess its present, in order to measure whether where you're going is progress or regress. And it's the elders who can give you that perspective. So one of the best contributions that elders can give to the younger generation and to their community is perspective. Because you get perspective when you have the whole picture. And you need to know what happened in the past, what is from the past, because it's not only your experience that we are speaking of in terms of the past, but the experience you've inherited. So remember, you've also inherited the elders who came before you became an elder. So you're walking with your experience, and you're walking with the continuity of the experience of the elders who came before you. So you are that repository. You are that that library and institution and that museum that I talked about. So again, I see in the ideal society, elders having a position of authority as counselors and as advisors to the current players of the current generation of any society and community, and helping them to achieve their goals much more accurately and successfully.
Yeah, what stood out to me there is most definitely if you don't have that manual, it can take you 3 days to figure it out rather than 3 minutes.
Absolutely.
And a lot of us are just running around trying to figure it out in circles. Meanwhile, you can just simply reach for a mentor and basically activate that reservoir within you.
One of the things that I think that on the same subject matter, one of the mistakes that every youthful generation make is that they, as young people, have come into the world and the world starts with their existence. In other words, you forget that the elders that you see in your community were you.
Right.
So They had the same thoughts and ideas that you had at that time in your life.
Right.
So they're more equipped to give you advice from where you are to get to where they are than you are to bring yourself from where you are to where you want to be.
Right. Yeah.
Because you've been where they are. They haven't been where you are, but you've been where they are. So you've been 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 before.
Right.
But as a 20-year-old, 30-year-old, they've never been 40, 50, 60
That's
before.
right.
So they have a lot more to share about the path that you're on
Right.
than you can advise them about the path that they're on.
Right. And I feel like something that I want to say is like, I think youth today feel like they don't want to be told what to do. But I don't think that's what an elder is going to do, is tell you what to do.
No.
It's just to advise you.
It's advise and counsel.
Right.
Advice and counsel. Because there's something about you. You're going to do what you are compelled to do anyway as a young person.
Right.
But you do it with more advice and equipped better to do it.
Right.
But you're going to do it because you're going to serve your generation. You were brought here. Any young person is brought to serve their generation. And so you're going to do the things that are necessary to serve your generation. But you do it more better equipped when you have more advice from elders. Yes, in an alignment. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Last couple of questions. So, what is the significance of rites of passage programming for young people in Africa and across the diaspora?
I think the rites of passage is very important because all of our societies had it. And that one of the things that happened with people of African descent in particular is that our institutions were attacked and broke down. All of our institutions, from family to village to clan to nation to ethnicity, we all had these institutions in place of how we made the formal transition from adolescence into adulthood, from dependency to responsibility. When you were born, you're dependent on your parents and your community to look out for you and take care of you. And there comes a time when the community looks at you to become responsible to uphold your end in the community and with your family. Starts with family. The community puts an obligation on you to be responsible for family because the family unit is the strength of every community and every village. So if you can't maintain a strong family, you make the village weak. You make the community weak because a village and a community and a nation is weakened by the weakness or the strength of a family, every family. So that rites of passage helps you to become a responsible man or woman to the family, to the village, to the community, to the nation. And we have a way that that's done. The rituals may vary, but the process is very similar because, as I said, it goes from dependency to responsibility. And that dependency is on your whole community. You're depending on to protect you as a young person, to nurture you, to raise you. And then there comes a time when we said, we've given you all the components and all the facility that you need to be a responsible adult now. And we're letting you know that you're passing the stage of dependency to responsibility. And now you have to be a responsible member of this community as an adult. And we're giving you that rites of passage that now we've changed our view of you from an adolescent dependent to a responsible adult. And these are the things that we basically require of you to be responsible. And that the whole community has witnessed that. The whole community has witnessed your fruition into that flowering of a responsible adult. And we have these expectations of you. And so those expectations we can demand because we know we have equipped you with what it takes to be responsible. And it's very valuable. So when we had the period of enslavement over centuries, and then the period of colonization, and these words are just words, but inside of those words is so much, because to enslave a free human being, he has to go through a process. And the process breaks down who that person is. And it becomes acculturated to a new culture, a new cult of obedience. And that means to surrender the systems that you know, the systems that you're accustomed to, the values that you know and what you respect, and you accept a foreign system. And the same thing that colonialism does on a broader scale. It breaks down your institutions, makes your institutions irrelevant, It redefines them into a classification of irrelevance, introduces you into a new system that makes you appreciate values outside of your system, and therefore you end up not knowing yourself, and you be remade in the image and likeness of someone else.
That's right.
So that's why it's so important for us to reach back in the Sankofa. We say that in Ghana here in the Akan tradition, Sankofa. Go back and fetch it in order to go forward. So it's important for us to reach back to recover from the indoctrinations that we have received in foreign cultures and foreign values, to reinstitute, based upon our own traditions, how it is that we are to be molded as responsible men and women in our African society context.
Wow, wow. So you mentioned something about, I think, 37 years you've been traveling, but how long have you been doing rites of passage work?
Probably about 50 years.
50 years.
Because I came into consciousness very early, at about 19 years old.
Okay.
And I was a freshman at the university in Savannah State College.
Okay.
And I was at the crossroads of figuring out what did I want my education to mean for me and my community.
Right. Okay.
I didn't want to just get a degree so that I can make a big salary and I can be successful in Western terms. I wanted to make sure that my education meant something to my community and to my village. And so it was with that I decided that one of the biggest contributions I could make was to start my own school, an educational system. So it started out by starting an elementary school with an African-centered curriculum.
Wow.
And so that was to train a new generation of African youth and who it is that they were with the knowledge of self. I felt totally frustrated that I had to go all the way to university to start my own independent quest to study African history. I've gone through kindergarten, 12 years of education, and never came in contact with any meaningful information of who I was as a person of African descent and who my people were. I only know that I saw these pictures of these slave ships, and that we came from West Africa and we were slaves. But how?
Exactly.
How? Nobody ever said it. In a whole 12 years of indoctrination and the Western education, there were no courses that linked me to that. And I didn't want another. I felt my biggest contribution could be to starting an educational institution that can change that paradigm. So I call that almost like a rites of passage, that we had to take these young people and train them early. And before that, I had been introduced to, my first job was working with day camps. So working with summer day camps, because this is the time of the war on poverty in the 1960s and upheavals in the black community. African mind, to lift up our people out of slavery, to even reconnect them to the African continent. We'd be shocked at some of the early charters of some of our early historically black institutions who they had wanted to reconnect back to Africa, and be a vehicle not only to lift up our brothers and sisters in the United States of America and elsewhere in the Caribbean and South America, but to link up the African family. They were Pan-Africanists before we had a term called Pan-Africanism. But in content, they were that. But a lot of them, because of the lack of funding, the lack of support, and the institutional sabotaging that came from, European institutions, white American institutions, they undermined them. So I say some of the biggest challenges that I recognize is the fight to maintain and sustain our institutions and to bring our individual struggles, our collective group struggles, to the level of institutions that can sustain us. And that can carry on beyond us. Where is the institute of the ideology of Malcolm X? Where's the institute of the ideology of Marcus Garvey? Where's the institute of the ideology of Kwame Nkrumah? Who's training people to think like Kwame Nkrumah? Who's training people to think like Denmark Vesey? Paid to this day, and you have we going around saying, why is Guinea so poor? Because we don't understand the history of the struggle, institutional struggle. We would say Guinea is poor. Look at that. We can't maintain and run our own countries. So my greatest look back and what I would like to pass on to younger people is that we must build and sustain our own institutions that reflect our ideology and the heroes and sheroes that we've been sent, that are now ancestors. Our best veneration of them and honoring of them is to keep their vision of who we are and who we have the potential to be alive. You can't allow for their sabotage, their assassination, their eliminations to die.
That's right.
Because they're no longer with us physically. Their mind and their thoughts must live on, like every other people who sustain their heroes. China today is strong. That means Mao Zedong is still alive.
Exactly.
He's an ancestor now. But the vision and the strength of China is based upon Chinese people not forgetting Mao Zedong.
That's right.
You see, India, they have not forgotten Nehru. They have not forgotten Mahatma Gandhi. The vision is a part of a continuity, and that's why you see those who are on the same level of Ghana. 65 years ago, China and India and Ghana, there was no difference.
Right.
But because those nations are part of the strength of their ancestors and they enjoy the strength of continuity, that's the best respect they can pay to their ancestors, is to live out that ideal. Live out those ideas. Not that they are the exact replica, but that's the foundation. And they brought the ideas of their generation and built upon that foundation. They haven't tore the thing down and started a new foundation. They built on the foundations. Doesn't mean that we don't improve upon what Marcus Garvey dreamed of, what Kwame Nkrumah dreamed of, what Martin Delaney or Malcolm X or Martin Luther King or Frederick Douglass dreamed of. But I mean, we build upon it.
Right.
We don't start over again.
Right.
We don't say, I want to buy my own land and build my own foundation and start my own building. And then somebody comes behind you and say the same thing. I'll buy my own land, start my own foundation, and build my own building. I want to be myself. No, you build on the foundations that were built. You expand.
Right.
Doesn't mean, the first colleges we had, they had one building. Now the average university, how many buildings do they have? How many departments do they have?
Exactly.
Not because they went somewhere else and started a new university. They kept with that university, and they expanded it. And they embellished upon it. And they grew it. And that's what they enjoy.
Right. Wow. Again, what stood out to me there is almost everyone that I speak to that's between the ages of like 30 and 45, they want to come to Africa and build their own community. And that's always the thing, is I want to build my community and everyone's going to do this and that. And if they don't do this, then they're not allowed in it. And I'm like, so what makes you different from...
Absolutely.
But you kind of said it a little bit, but just to bring this interview to a close, clearly define what your call to action for all African youth across the globe is.
The call to action is to be able to add value to yourself and appreciation as an African, not as an individual. Don't apologize to anybody for loving self. It is time for us to look at ourselves, lift ourselves up, invest in ourselves, appreciate ourselves, trust in ourselves. We have patience for other people who offend us. We have patience for other people who wrong us. So let's have patience for each other. Even if you are offended by a brother or a sister, have patience and work together and look towards how we can build together. It is not about individual islands, it's about collective communities. And so let that be the clarion call. This is our time. So in order for it to be our time, let's believe in the hour, which is the us, which is we.
That's right. Hey, ashe, ashe. Thank you so much, Rabbi KOHAIN.
Quite welcome.